Hosted in conjunction with CRIISP Media, the CEO interview series allows investors to hear directly from the CEOs leading the companies featured on Wholesale Investor. Enjoy the interview and reach out via the details in the description.
Hi and welcome to another CRIISP TV interview. Today I am joined by John Fletcher, Executive Chairman of the Board at Green Distillation Technologies, and Trevor Bayley, the co-founder and COO. GDT is the first Australian company to receive an award in innovation at the prestigious Edison Awards in the US. And it's a pleasure to be interviewing both these gentlemen today. Thank you for joining me today, John and Trevor.
Thank you, Sidney. Right.
John, we're just going to start with you, and this is for the audience and to give them a brief overview. Do you mind at first expounding upon exactly who GDT is and what your value proposition is to the market?
Sure. Well, good morning. GDT is an Australian company, and we've developed a proprietary process that converts end-of-life tyres into three commodities of carbon, oil and steel. The technology is a world first, and its inventor, Dennis Randall, is also Australian. And Dennis has had pretty extensive experience in the oil, gas, chemical and waste-to-energy space. And as you already mentioned in the intro, Sidney, we were the first Australian company to receive an award for innovation at the prestigious Edison Awards in the US. Now, importantly for potential investors, the development work is done and the technology is proven. Mm-hmm. Capital now being sought is to roll out plants across Australia. So the value proposition we bring, I think, is quite compelling. One of the world's more difficult waste streams can now be converted emission-free into commodities that have existing markets. I think GDT is a perfect example of what they now call the circular economy. So the combination of a disposal gate fee that we charge to tyre collectors, together with the revenue from commodity sales, results in highly attractive investment returns, and it requires no government recycling subsidies. Importantly, GDT operates with a negative carbon footprint.
John, can I ask you something, and this is just to help me break this down a bit further. Can you just isolate the problem at hand that you saw in the market? You touched on it slightly with the emission, that this is emission-free, and this obviously is a turnkey solution in the circular economy. Can you talk to me about the specific problem you identified in the market that motivated, I guess, the founding team to work on this solution, GDT?
Look, end-of-life tyres is a big problem everywhere. When you think about 1.7 billion car and truck tyres are generated globally every year, 26 million of those come out of the Australian marketplace. But as everybody would understand, when people's safety and lives are at risk, the manufacture of a new car and truck tyre is necessarily very robust. These characteristics make tyres quite difficult to deal with as a waste stream. If you deposit them in a landfill, they take over 300 years to biodegrade. That's the big problem I saw, and my motivation to work with GDT, I think, was a bit of a case of a career deja vu somewhat. Back in the late 70s for me, I was working at Brambles and I was managing the Victorian operation of Cleanaway. Now, Cleanaway is still today Australia's largest waste company. But back then, tyre disposal was a significant problem with very few options. Dumping and stockpiling was prolific. So when I was approached to become the chairman of GDT several years ago, I was staggered to find that very little changed in the market over those last 40 years. But for me, I saw GDT as a real opportunity to make a difference and to help solve a problem that I think has been such really since the tyre was invented over 120 years ago.
Absolutely, and the timing now is obviously impeccable with the environmental consciousness that most nations have at the moment. Now, can I ask you, John, a final question before we go over to Trevor? In terms of market response, you were obviously staggered when you stumbled upon this as an opportunity, as a professional opportunity. In terms of market response, has there been any, first of all, and if so, who are these key clients and what is in the pipeline?
Yeah, I think the market's in an interesting space right now because coincidence with us emerging as a potential new option for disposal. I think the most significant event that's happened in the market recently has been the move by the federal government to ban the export of certain waste streams such as plastics, glass, paper and tyres. And I think this was the government's recognition that a modern, developed countries like Australia should be responsible for their own waste. Now, in the case of tyres, the ban on the export of whole bale tyres comes effective December this year.
Okay.
Now, this is important when one considers that in 2020, Tyre Stewardship Australia estimated that 71% of all waste car and truck tyres were being exported, predominantly to Asia and India. Now, incredible as that sounds, this is not something Australia can be particularly proud of.
Sure.
This government ban effectively doubles the volumes that will need to be processed here. And the capacity to do those volumes currently doesn't exist. So I think it's quite timely that the rollout of GDT plants across Australia could accommodate 40% of these market volumes. Now, we've got competitors offering disposal within Australia now, and they're primarily focused on crumbing of the tyres to be used in applications, such as playground surfaces, pathways, and some of it goes in as an ingredient in road surfacing. But the markets in Australia for these applications are pretty limited. So with the ban coming, what we have seen is a significant increase in collection fees as collectors get prepared for the absence of the export of bale tyres. So we're entering the marketplace when a lot of things are going our way. And so
Absolutely.
that convergence of the government ban pushing up collection prices couldn't have really been timed much better for our entry.
I think that's going to be a key part of this interview, understanding exactly what you just said, because that regulatory tailwind is obviously very rare and unique to an industry. And you just stated there that the competitors are more in what you call it, the crumbing of tyres, which is obviously used for the surface of playgrounds, right, and other aspects. Okay, very interesting. Trevor, I'm going to go over to you now and ask you a few questions. And just to start with, can you talk to us about the technology behind GDT? How does that destructive distillation process work? And let's because this is important in light of what John just said about the difference between what you do and the competitor does. And when people do dispose of their tyres, when this ban on exports comes in December, was it? It'll be interesting to see what the alternative solution is and why it's better. So can you talk to us about that?
Sure. In the first place, in the competition in the Australian market is completely different to what we do. We're unique in Australia. So the way the destructive distillation process works is that the rubber compounds in a tyre are a complex mix of hydrocarbons bonded with other chemicals and that have undergone a chemical treatment and built around a steel skeleton. This is a very difficult item to break up, to cut, or to otherwise destroy. So our process targets the carbon atoms within the hydrocarbon structure, and we use heat as our weapon. The carbon atoms are encouraged to separate from each other and from any other atom that they are in combination with. And when that begins to happen, they reform into a different structure, which is in the form of a vapor. That vapor is extracted through a vacuum process in an enclosed system, and the vapor is passed through a condenser where it is converted into a manufactured oil. When all the reaction is completed inside the process chamber, we are left with a mixture of a carbon product and the steel skeleton. Using gravity, that mixture is dropped into a cooling process. The process door closes and the whole thing starts all over again. It's a continuous batch process. 100% of the tyre is converted into one of those three components, either the oil through vapor, left as carbon in the end of the reaction, and of course the steel skeleton, which remains virtually unchanged. This is done in an emission-free environment. There's two vapor streams. The one vapor stream is the one I've described, which is the oil held in a vacuum in an enclosed system. And the other vapor stream is the hot gas. We burn about 3% of the oil we produce to provide the heat that is necessary for the system. And that hot gas is exhausted through a stack at concentrations well below any EPA standards anywhere in the world. The carbon itself goes off to various other industries, and the steel, of course, goes back into scrap. As I said, we process 100% of the tyre. There is no waste, and emissions from the heat system are well below EPA standards.
And Trevor, how would you compare this to the standard practice? And I guess what are you've touched on it, but what are the consequences with this technology that you guys have created?
Well, there's a couple of things there. Indeed, the standard practice in Australia, because of a reluctance by the authorities to embrace these sorts of technologies, is limited to tyre-derived fuel and crumb rubber. Tyre-derived fuel is a euphemism for burning the tyre. They cut the tyre into smaller pieces and use it in furnaces, etc. Majority of that product is exported, and the ban will not impact that export. The difficulty for them is that other countries, the recipient countries, are clamping down on the use of tyre-derived fuel, and so there are issues with the potential for that market. The crumb rubber, on the other hand, comes in various sizes, and it's used in a variety of applications. As John said before, for playground surfaces, for mixing with asphalt. They use it in horse race tracks and arenas. And the issue becomes the fact that it's all well and good that you can process 1 million tyres a year into crumb rubber, but it's 1 million tyres every year. And you can't resurface the same piece of road or the same playground or the same horse race track
so it
every
compounds
year.
Over time. Yeah.
Yeah. So in our case, the two major products, disregarding the steel, which is a well-known commodity, and Australia has a demand for 4.5 million tonnes of scrap steel every year, with a current production figure around 3 million tonnes. Disregarding that, the other two products are replacements for fossil fuel derived products. So again, repeating John's words, we fit right into the circular economy, and sustainability is our catchphrase.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that overview, Trevor. John, I'm going to come back to you on the venture side of things. What sort of defenses does GDT have in place to protect them from the current or any upcoming competition that is vying for this top spot as the best solution?
Yeah, look, I don't think the way the market is that there is going to be too much vying for top spot. I think what the Australian market has got at the moment is a distinct lack of capacity to deal with the volumes. And so from that point of view, our competition is unlikely to come directly at us, because our technology is proprietary, and so we don't see anybody being able to, directly reproduce what we do. The existing competitors are producing crumb products, and they'll continue to play a role in the marketplace, as Trevor has said. We were advised pretty early on in our process against relying on patents for what we do, because, as you know, once you lodge them, they become publicly discoverable. That allows the potential for people to copy. We keep our technology as a trade secret, and I think the best example of how that works in the world is Coca-Cola, who's protected its formula for many, many years that way. We have reactor control software, which is pretty critical to plant performance, which is managed centrally away from the plants. So we don't have anybody in the plant operations that's understanding of, you know, our formula and how it works. And we also go to the lengths of, when we build our plants, of using various fabricators. And in that way, we ensure that we've got limited exposure to anyone's supply on how the whole process works. But I think importantly in the marketplace, we don't see ourselves as disruptors to the existing collection segment. Our role is to provide a efficient and profitable disposal option. That means we want to cooperate with those collectors who are seeking an environmentally acceptable disposal option at market rates. So, as I mentioned previously, our plan is to have 7 plants in Australia. That would solve 40% of the market volumes. I think you could see that with the impending government bans, it's going to provide sufficient volumes for alternative disposal options to coexist with us.
Absolutely. So it is a turnkey solution for the current way things are done and how the market interacts, which is important. Now, just a final question, John, and this is just one for the prospective investors who are watching this interview. What does a roadmap look like for GDT over the next 6 to 12 months? You've touched on one major event, which is the ban on exports. But what other milestones are you anticipating? What would excite them?
Okay, well, I think success in our capital raising provides, I think, for us a pretty clear roadmap over the next 6 to 12 months. First and foremost, I think, is the expansion of the plant that's already at Warren up to full capacity and operating 24/7. All of our plants will be operating 24/7. To date, that plant's been used to demonstrate the GDT technology to potential investors. We've also been able to watch the process from end to end, those that have come up to see it, how an end-of-life tyre can be converted into carbon, oil and steel as you sit and watch it. Additionally, we've used that plant to provide samples of the end commodities of oil and carbon. They're being sent all around the world to potential buyers, and that way we can ensure that we've got plenty of choice on who we sell our products to. At the same time, the important part of the roadmap is to get going on our second plant, which is scheduled to be at Toowoomba in Queensland. Fortunately, the location we've already got permitted. It's shovel ready, and as soon as we have funds, we're off on that. But I guess the key milestone now is to have demonstrable operating performance and data from Warren to underpin what we see as our final capital raising, which will probably be October, November next year, and more likely than not, probably done through an IPO. And we think that the combination of this final capital raising, together with some internally generated cash and a sensible balance of some external debt, will enable us to roll out the 7 plants in Australia, as well as exploring some of the offshore opportunities we have in front of us. Similar problems with disposal of end-of-life tyres exist in many other countries, and we've already got discussions underway with parties in the US, Europe, and the Middle East. But near term, I'd say our focus, the roadmap, is about getting 2 plants operating here in Australia, and success in this capital raising, is the avenue through which that milestone can be achieved. So I think from prospective investors, there are 3 factors converging right now, which I think should form part of any consideration on whether or not they would want to invest with us. First one is the broad picture, which is the irreversible world focus on green, recyclables, renewables, and the circular economy. And I don't think there's any sign of this turning back. The second we've talked about, which is the Australian government ban on the export of whole bale tyres, becomes effective next month, December 2021. This doubles the volumes that will require processing here in Australia. And thirdly, GDT is proven and commercialised to process the waste tyres. And so with a plant currently being expanded and a second site in Queensland, I think together GDT makes a pretty compelling investment opportunity.
John and Trevor, thank you so much for coming on today. And obviously for those who are interested in speaking to a representative of the team, we will have the details on the side of the screen. And I wish you both the best of luck with your venture.
I appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.